Please welcome our keynote speaker, Kevin Haggerty.
Well, good morning. I am just so absolutely glad to be here today because I get to be in the Valley talking to you, and my heart is filled with warmth seeing everyone, a lot of friends from the work we've done with Encompass over the past few years. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I like to really introduce myself kind of as a recovering juvenile corrections worker. I worked for about 10 years at Echo Glen Children's Center, and I learned firsthand at Echo Glen about the devastation of exposure to violence. I learned that hurt people hurt and that pain causes pain. And in 1985, I began working with Dave Hawkins and Rick Catalano at the University of Washington School of Social Work to really better understand what we could do to move upstream and prevent problems, prevent trauma, and prevent issues like substance abuse, teen pregnancy, high school dropout, depression, and anxiety amongst young people. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about some of what I've learned. I also live in the Valley, you heard that. As a relative newcomer of 32 years, that's new to the Valley, my wife Molly and I have made a home here. Molly teaches second grade at Obstead Elementary School, and that gives me a bit of a glimpse into the school-age developmental issues. All three of our adult children graduated from school here at Mount Si High School, and so I have a bit of an understanding of the context of growing up in the Valley. And just as an aside, I am a really pretty happy, proud grandpa of a 19-month-old, Juniper Rain, and a new grandson who was born on Saturday, Francis Patrick Haggerty, so we're really excited. I've also been really lucky to have worked on the board of Encompass for probably about a dozen years at the turn of the century. During the last capital campaign with Children's Services of Snow Valley. I'm particularly proud of how Encompass was an early adopter of evidence-based programs to demonstrate impact. They were the first agency in the state to adopt the parent-child interaction training. They continued this tradition of trailblazing work with pilot work they're doing at Timber Ridge to address trauma in schools. It's my hope that today I can bring both my practice experience and my research experience to talk with you about three important things. First, I've been asked to talk a bit about the toxic stress associated with adverse childhood experiences and the impact these experiences have on youth behavior. Second, I'd like to explore how we might be able to move upstream and turn off the trauma tap and how Encompass is doing that in our community. And finally, I want to share with you a strategy we've been using with success in families and schools to help build community resilience, using what we call the social development strategy. Now, many of you know that I'm kind of a numbers guy. That's what I do for a living as a professor at UW School of Social Work. I do research to help understand how we can create environments where young people can thrive. And here are some examples about why we're here today. First, the good news. Statewide, teenage binge drinking has dropped from an all-time high in 1998 from about 30% of seniors reporting binge drinking in the last 2 weeks down to 14% in the last 2018 Healthy Youth Survey data. That's a big drop. Teenage pregnancy is down markedly. Youth crime and violence are still way down from their highs in the 1990s. We've made significant progress in many of these areas. And while we've made important impacts on reducing some of these problem behaviors, we have not solved them. We also know that, well, nationally, teen dating, sexual activity, and driving have dropped dramatically. Loneliness, depression, and suicide are on the increase. In Washington State, the rate of young people seriously considering suicide has increased by 35% over the last decade. Even at a time when everyone is seemingly connected, people are feeling lonelier than ever. And those most at risk are those who have been exposed to early adversity. So to my first point, toxic stress from adverse childhood experiences has long-term effects on health and behavior. Work by a group of researchers at Kaiser Permanente discovered that there were 3 important types of childhood experiences that cause toxic stress. These are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. The 3 types are abuse. This includes sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Second is neglect. This includes physical or emotional. And third is what's considered household dysfunction. This includes having a parent with a substance use problem, a mental illness, a parent who's been incarcerated, or exposure to violence, especially seeing your mom treated violently, and divorce. Now, all of us are probably looking at the slide going, I wonder what I've been exposed to. And it may not surprise you that the most frequent ACE is a parent with a substance use problem. The second most is physical abuse, even higher than divorce. There are 2 other ACEs that are not on this list, and we can think of these as another kind of ACE, adverse community experiences. Take a look. One is poverty, and another is racism and discrimination. Let me provide an example of poverty. Notwithstanding the college admissions scandal, the average SAT score for a child from a family living in extreme poverty below $20,000 a year is 1323, compared to 1721 for someone with a family of income of $200,000 or more. Income matters. Poverty matters. Poverty is an adverse childhood experience. Racism is an adverse childhood experience. Let me give an example of racism. College-educated black women have higher infant mortality rates than whites who did not graduate from high school. Let me say this again. Race is an ACE. College-educated black women have higher infant mortality rates than white women who did not graduate from high school. All these ACEs contribute to what we call toxic stress. So why do we care about toxic stress? Well, toxic stress damages the brain, and Neil talked about the brain development being so important during these early years. And this can lead to lifelong problems in learning, in behavior, physical, and mental health. Scientists now know that chronic, unrelenting stress in early childhood, caused by ACEs, for example, can be toxic to the developing neurons. Well, positive stress, not getting the toy you want on the playground as a toddler, is important and necessary to learn how to cope during childhood. Having that unrelenting toxic stress causes wear and tear on the body and on the body's stress management system and on shaping the architecture of the developing brain. There are 3 important things to understand about ACEs. First, they're common. As I noted, about 29% of study participants report parents with addiction problems. About 26% report physical abuse, 21% report sexual abuse. Second, ACEs cluster. About 40% of the Kaiser Permanente sample reported 2 or more ACEs, and 12.5% experienced 4 or more. Because ACEs cluster, most research looks at the clustering effect of ACEs rather than the individual effect. Third, ACEs have a dose response with many health problems. The more ACEs, the more likely it is that someone will experience health problems like diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease, and behavior issues like smoking and excessive drinking. In Washington State, nearly 20% of 8th graders reported being physically hurt or on purpose by an adult in our last Healthy Youth survey. And when 8th grade students were asked how often a parent or adult in your home swears at you, insults you, or puts you down or humiliates you, 1/3 said sometimes, often, or very often. But I want to take a step away from the numbers for just a moment. About 4 years ago, I got that kind of call at work that no one ever wants to receive. My wife called me to tell me that her 60-year-old brother from Texas had shot himself. Although he'd fought the feeling of not being good enough in school as a child and the demons of depression, addiction, and anxiety, since he'd been a teen, we had not expected he would take his own life. We were shocked, We felt guilty and angry, and we still are. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with young people in Snoqualmie Valley? Well, I'm surprised when I look at the numbers of young people who report that they've seriously considered suicide in Washington State. In 2018, nearly 18% of 10th graders have seriously considered suicide in Washington State by making a plan, and 10% have actually made an attempt. Although my brother-in-law was in high school, 45 years ago, there's still a stigma to receiving mental health services, and there's still a stigma associated with suicide. It's important to know that ACEs don't explain everything. Though Pete wasn't exposed to ACEs, he was haunted by the trauma he experienced of not fitting in and not feeling he lived up to people's expectations. When my wife and her siblings were scattering Pete's ashes in the aspen trees in Wyoming, they reflected on how some of the trees were vibrant, green, and growing, and others were a little dried and burnt out, much like Pete's life. Much of it was filled with life, vibrant and growing, but he was haunted by a sense of failure, burden. And like I said, ACEs don't explain everything. My second point is that we can do something about this. We know the elements that need to be in place in agencies and organizations to promote resilience, communities, and resilient homes and schools. These just kind of make sense. Things like safety, trust, transparency, support, collaboration, and empowerment. When I think of these things, I think of how Encompass is the manifestation of these important elements here in the Valley. Here's a couple of examples. Collaboration, we just heard about ECAP and Riverview. That's amazing. Encompass has also piloted this trauma-informed training program at Timber Ridge Elementary School to focus on behavioral health, and staff provide group training, individual consultation to teachers, and a lending library for parents and teachers. Providing empowerment, voice and choice. Encompass has a behavioral health team that provides therapy both at the clinic and in the mobile therapy unit that I hope you get a chance to see. It's outside. You can take a look at it, and it goes where it needs to go. It might even come to you. Trustworthiness and transparency. Encompass has added evidence-based programming, including multiple therapists using promoting first relationships, incredible years, parent-child interaction therapy, and the trust-based relationship therapy. As a researcher, using the best evidence to get the best outcomes makes me so happy that we have this resource in our valley. Encompass provides many other informed approaches to change conditions to promote well-being. It's helping us be a more informed community. You'll hear other stories about how Encompass helps serve the valley later, and how they build trust when other systems failed, especially those who are most vulnerable, foster youth. Now to my third point, the social development strategy. Research shows that there's 5 basic factors that promote strong social development, just like 5 fingers on your hand. I call these the big 5. All children need meaningful opportunities to be engaged and activated. So the first one is opportunity. When my son Brendan picks up that little Francis, that's an opportunity for involvement. The second one is skills. All kids need the skills to be actively engaged and involved successfully. And we heard the young people on the video talking about the skills they were learning. And so when that little Francis coos at Brendan, that's skillful behavior. And that leads to that third one, that's recognition. And that Brendan looks at that little baby and goes, oh my gosh, look at him cooing at me. And that starts that gyroscope of the fourth important element. That's bonding, that's real connection. That's those moment-to-moment connections that we have in everyday life, coming together to really focus on those strong connections, not on our phones, but with each other. And that gives you the motivation to follow the fifth thing, the shared beliefs and standards. Opportunities, skills, recognition, bonding, healthy beliefs, and clear standards. So, kind of just as common sense. Our longitudinal study with the Seattle School District that began in the 1980s contributes to what we know about how to promote strong, healthy behavior. In a study we did where we provided an intervention in Seattle schools in the 1980s that focused on three things: helping build opportunities in classrooms, skills and recognition by doing social emotional learning in classrooms, teacher training on classroom behavior and teaching instruction, and parenting training for helping child succeed in school and guiding good choices. We've been following 808 young people since the 1980s. We are in touch with them about every 3 years. They're about 42 years old now. 55 were in low-income communities. 52% were people of color. By age 18, here's some of the things we found. 60% of the control group experienced violence in their lifetime, compared to 48% in the intervention group. Remember, hurt people hurt, and pain causes pain. 14% of the intervention group versus 6% of the control had finished at least 2 years of college by age 21. They also are significantly more likely to be employed, and the income disparity for a young African American was eliminated. Young African American adults from the program were earning $20,000 a year more than their control counterparts at age 27. Intervention participants were significantly less likely to have sold illegal drugs in the past year, to have committed a criminal record, and by age 39, these adults reported significantly better health outcomes, higher incomes, fewer diagnosed mental health problems, significantly less suicide ideation, and fewer suicide attempts. But even more important, to our point, their children were independently rated to have fewer developmental delays. And you can see on this slide over on this side, whatever side, that left side, significantly overall fewer delays rated by teachers and higher grades. What you see, the important thing is we know we are changing the trajectory of development. And this is the only study we know of that's actually demonstrated intervention effects into the next generation. So we can have this multiplying effect at actually turning off the trauma tap by reducing ACEs. Why am I telling you about this research? Because it shows that we can actually change the trajectory of health and behavior problems into the next generation. And there's good news. In our valley, Encompass is doing great work to promote well-being and social development. They are using approaches that implement the Big Five. The Parent-Child Home Program provides early learning specialists to meet families where they are, in their homes. They provide literacy opportunities, teach skills, recognize young kids for their accomplishments, and support that strong parent-child bond. The preschool program we heard the kids talking about on the video uses an evidence-based curriculum focused not just on academic skills, but on the social-emotional skills that really help them develop problem-solving, logical thinking, listening, speaking, and reading skills. Clear standards are shared when the children and teachers share their family meal together. Be clear about this. Encompass uses the evidence. They work to provide opportunities, skills, recognition, promote bonding, to give motivation to follow our shared beliefs and standards. As a result of progress in understanding prevention science and youth development, we now have an opportunity to build a resilient and trauma-informed community. We can make our valley a community where all children have equal opportunities, even in the face of risk. Where all children develop the skills they need for life. Where all children are provided a recognition for their contributions. Where all children are bonded and connected strongly to family, school, and our neighborhoods, and where all children are committed to positive futures free from the threat of violence and drug abuse. So what can you do to help create this resilient, trauma-informed community? Well, first, with young people you work with or live with, use the social development strategy. Second, teach someone you know about the social development strategy, those Big Five. And third, talk to others who aren't here today in our valley about what you learned about Encompass and how to support the work of Encompass. Encompass is here to help, and I'd say you're here to help too. And our job here today is to give big, to ensure that young people and their families in the Valley have the resources they need to grow strong and thrive. That's why Molly and I will be making a donation in Pete's honor to help someone avoid the demons that might haunt them the rest of their lives. So please join us. You can change the trajectory of a young person's life forever. Thank you.